David Fincher's Zodiac ends with Robert Graysmith standing across from Arthur Leigh Allen in a hardware store. No confession, no arrest, no new evidence. Just two men looking at each other. And yet somehow, it feels like the case has finally been solved. But it hasn't. The film never actually proves Allen was the killer. So why can a few seconds of eye contact feel more conclusive than nearly 3 hours of contradictory evidence? There are two ways to read that scene. Either Graysmith finally reached the truth, or the film has spent 2.5 hours training us to accept the feeling of certainty in place of proof. Zodiac reaches its emotional ending well before it reaches its factual one. In fact, it teaches us to confuse progress with proof long before Arthur Leigh Allen ever appears on screen. That lesson? That is Zodiac. We'll begin with the letters, because this is where the training begins. Before there's a suspect, there's a cipher. 408 symbols mailed to 3 newspapers, daring anyone to solve it. 2 amateurs, Donald and Betty Hardin, do exactly that at home within days. It's a real breakthrough. It also identifies no one. But the cipher gives the case a shape we can follow. Dates line up, locations appear on maps, names move between files. Information that looked chaotic becomes organized, and organization begins to feel like discovery. The case starts to become easier to see, and easier to see starts feeling closer to solved. Then a person finally arrives who seems to organize all of it. That person is Arthur Leigh Allen, and he doesn't arrive as a name on a list. He arrives as a presence, heavyset, calm in a way that reads as unsettling, answering questions with just enough hesitation to feel like there's something deeper behind that hesitation. When investigators press him about the bloody knives found in his car, he doesn't flinch. He just says he'd killed a chicken for dinner. It's the kind of detail that shouldn't mean anything, and yet somehow means everything, because of how easily, how specifically, he offers it. He lost a teaching job after allegations involving a student. He keeps turning up close enough to the case, geographically and otherwise, that he's difficult to dismiss. Allen doesn't just become a suspect, he gives the case a face. But the more coherent Allen becomes as a character, the less cooperative he becomes as a suspect. The handwriting analysis presented in the film does not match Allen. The fingerprints investigators compare do not match him either. He takes a polygraph that never really gives investigators the confirmation they want. Jurisdictions disagree with each other. Nothing the film presents becomes a case prosecutors can confidently bring. The film gives us enough to keep looking at Allen, but never enough to stop looking anywhere else. Each contradiction should loosen Allen's grip on the story. Instead, none of them quite manages to remove him from it. The handwriting fails to match, but there's room to question the comparison. The fingerprints fail to match, but there's room to question the prints. The polygraph refuses to settle anything. Once Allen feels coherent enough, every failed match becomes something we've tempted to work around, rather than a reason to let him go. Robert Graysmith is exactly the kind of person that gap works on. He's a cartoonist at the San Francisco Chronicle, not a detective, not a reporter, someone whose job is to draw things other people write. In this case, it gives him something that job never does, a reason to be in the room. He starts showing up where he isn't invited, keeping files nobody asked him to keep. At first, he wants to solve the case, but somewhere along the way, that turns into something else. He needs the case to have been solvable, because too much of his life now depends on believing all of this was leading somewhere. Stopping wouldn't just mean admitting the case beat him, it would mean giving back the only version of himself this investigation let him become. The irony is that Graysmith's family is forced to accept exactly what he cannot. They live with not knowing when he'll come home, how long this will last, or whether the answer he's chasing even exists. The case begins to enter his home right alongside him. The phone rings, the children hear the threats, and stacks of files begin occupying the rooms where ordinary life is supposed to happen. To Graysmith, every new detail might be the one that finally makes the years worthwhile. To his family, it's another reason their father or husband is somewhere else, even when he's standing in the same room. Graysmith is holding on to the idea that one more name, one more file, might finally make sense of everything he's given up. His family doesn't get to hold on to anything. They just get to watch him come and go in pursuit of an answer that may never come, with no idea if any of it is going to be worth the wait. So he takes what he has to the people equipped to do something with it, and what he gets back is caution. Reasonable caution. The department has already been burned by leads that looked solid and weren't, and nobody wants to move on a case this public without something that survives a courtroom. Detective Dave Toschi has been living with this case longer than Graysmith has. He's there when the murders are still immediate, when the letters first arrive, when every new lead carries the possibility that the killer might actually be caught. He works the case from inside the system, interviewing suspects, coordinating with other departments, chasing evidence that keeps slipping across jurisdictional lines. He watches the investigation expand and then slowly decay. He watches the investigation expand across departments, then slowly lose momentum as leads collapse, evidence fails to line up, and the case becomes harder to move forward. Allen unsettles Toschi too. He sees the same details Graysmith sees, and many of them bother him for the same reasons. But Toschi has also watched convincing leads collapse before. He knows how quickly a theory can begin organizing every fact around itself, and how dangerous that becomes when the evidence underneath it cannot hold. Toschi matters here because he wants many of the same things Graysmith wants. He spent years circling the same evidence, watching promising leads collapse and jurisdictions fail to cooperate. Allen bothers him too. The difference is that Toschi cannot treat recognition as resolution, because he's responsible for what happens after that feeling arrives. Graysmith only has to convince himself. Toschi would have to convince a prosecutor, a jury, and eventually anyone capable of pulling the theory apart. Every contradiction Graysmith can work around is a contradiction Toschi has to answer for. That does not make Toschi less committed to the truth. It means he has to remain inside uncertainty after Graysmith has become emotionally incapable of doing the same. And that is what gradually makes responsible caution feel like failure. Toschi has not become more passive. Graysmith, and eventually the audience, has become less willing to accept the standard Toschi still has to live by. One man can privately decide that Allen is the answer. The other has to prove it without him needing to be one. At first, caution feels responsible. By this point, it feels like delay. The evidence hasn't changed, but our tolerance for uncertainty has. Which is exactly when Zodiac stops explaining how certainty forms and lets us feel it happen before the evidence has earned it. Graysmith goes to question Bob Vaughn while chasing a different suspect entirely because a handwriting expert believes some old movie theater posters resemble the Zodiac letters. Partway through the conversation, Vaughn casually reveals that he drew the posters himself. Not the man Graysmith came asking about. Him. It's a small correction that changes everything we've been taught to think up to that point in the film. Suddenly, in the moment, every ounce of suspicion Graysmith had been carrying changes and is now landing on the man sitting across from him. One of the Zodiac's own letters had claimed he lived in a house with a basement, rare enough in California that investigators noticed. Graysmith's been carrying that detail around the whole film. So when Vaughn mentions that he has one, it drops straight into the picture Graysmith has already been building, and the offer to go downstairs and dig up old theater records lands less like an errand and more like a threat. Down in the basement, something in Graysmith shifts before he can name it. His breathing goes shallow, his steps slow, and then footsteps sound from somewhere above them. He asks Vaughn who else is in the house. Vaughn tells him he lives alone. No weapon shows up on screen, no danger gets confirmed, nothing actually happens down there beyond the man calmly digging through a box of old files. The fear is completely real. The threat behind it never really is. None of this proves Vaughn is the killer. The scene never says so, and the film drops him from the investigation as soon as Graysmith leaves. Vaughn was never really a suspect. He was practice. Fincher manufactures a full-body verdict with almost no evidence at all. Graysmith feels the conclusion before he can prove it. So do we. Before Vaughn, suspicion grows through information. In the basement, Fincher makes us feel it before the evidence can catch up. The scene isn't only showing us how Graysmith's mind works, it puts us inside of it, feeling that same tension he is. And for a few minutes, a procedural thriller becomes a horror film. Once that happens, the question is no longer whether Allen has more evidence around him than Vaughn. Of course he does. The question is whether more evidence changes the mechanism, or only makes the feeling harder to resist. Allen keeps returning while every other name passes through the film and disappears, Vaughn included. Each new appearance carries the same memory of the last one. The knives, the watch, the geography, even the evidence that failed to match. Other suspects resist when their theory collapses. Allen's accumulates. The film doesn't need to prove him more often. It only needs to keep bringing him back. Simply surviving that long inside the story starts to feel like evidence. But staying in the movie is not the same as surviving scrutiny. By this point, we're not neutral anymore either. New suspects keep appearing and dissolving. Jurisdictions can't agree. The evidence keeps contradicting itself. Zodiac doesn't mark time as progress. It marks time as erosion. A date appears, then another, then another. The people investigating the case age while the evidence stays frozen. Careers change, relationships break, the murders recede further into the past, while the need to explain them somehow becomes more urgent. The longer the case stays open, the less uncertainty feels like an honest condition, and the more it feels like a failure someone should have corrected by now. We begin the film wanting the investigators to be careful. By the end, we want them to be finished. We haven't been asked to solve anything, but we've been sitting inside that exhaustion for 2 hours, and exhaustion wants somewhere to land. By the time the film offers Allen again, choosing him feels less like reaching a conclusion than escaping the alternative. When Allen shows up again, we don't choose him because we're sure, we choose him because we're done. The basement scene shows how the body can reach a verdict before the facts do. The hardware store gives that verdict the face. In the basement, a room becomes threatening because Graysmith enters it, with the conclusion already forming. In the hardware store, a face becomes conclusive for the same reason. Neither place ever actually gives him anything to go on. He shows up already certain, and that certainty does the work the scene itself never does. Two men hold each other's gaze. Fincher stages the scene with the visual grammar of a confession. The stillness, the shot and reverse shot, the sense that one man has finally recognized the other, while withholding the confession itself. Graysmith is the only person visibly receiving an answer. Allen gives him almost nothing back. This isn't mutual recognition. It's one man assigning meaning to another man's stillness, and Allen's unreadable face can hold everything Graysmith and the audience have carried into that store. The scene adds no evidence. It simply makes all the existing suspicion feel as though it has finally arrived somewhere. Years later, survivor Mike Maggio identifies Allen from a photograph. It's the film's strongest direct identification, and it arrives after the hardware store scene has already made Allen feel like the answer. The identification doesn't create the certainty. It arrives to reinforce a certainty the film has already given us. Then the cards complicate it again. Allen died of a heart attack before another interview could happen. A partial DNA profile didn't match him. Investigators still declined to rule him out, and the case remains unsolved. A story can end once everything points in one direction. A criminal case can't. It has to hold up. So why does the hardware store stare survive all of that? Graysmith began the film looking for the man behind the letters. By the end, he's looking for something the evidence can no longer provide. Permission to stop. And after nearly 3 hours of dead ends, contradictions, and a life quietly consumed by the search, we feel that same need. That's why this scene feels like a conclusion. Not because Allen finally gives himself away, but because the film gives our uncertainty somewhere to land. Arthur Leigh Allen's face was never the answer. It's the shape an answer takes once you've grown too tired to keep living without one. The film never actually proves who the killer was. What it proves is how badly we need the killer to have a face. If Zodiac got under your skin, that's kind of the whole point of the channel. We're not here to tell you what a movie's about. We're here to find the exact moment it decided how you'd feel about it. New breakdowns like this one drop regularly. Subscribe if you want to keep chasing that with me. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching. Please take care of yourself.